Hi, thank you for joining us in this presentation today. First off, we wanted to start by introducing ourselves. I am Molly Reed.
I am Melissa Phillips.
I am Mary Kraychek.
I'm Carrie Elliott.
And I am Holly Green.
Awesome. And we are actually presenting a presentation today based off of replication of original study by Curdy and Associates, which was internet-based contingency management, increasing walking steps in sedentary adults. So first off, the CDC reports that the National Institute of Health reports that 1 in 3 people are obese, and one of the leading reasons is the lack of physical activity, so being sedentary. And there have been several studies that show different ways and techniques to increase physical activity using behavioral techniques such as, goal setting, contingencies, feedback, simple recording step behavior, and they all showed to increase total step counts for exercise levels and maintain a healthy lifestyle. So it does show that behavior techniques may be successful in increasing exercise. So for our study, we wanted to replicate this, and there were 2 experiments done in the original study. The first one was giving participants a monetary consequence for each time they met 3 out of 5 days of their week goal steps. The second one was doing the same thing but without monetary consequences. And for the purposes of our study, we decided to just go with experiment 2, which was, increasing goal steps when 3 out of 5 days were met, the criterion, but no monetary consequences were given. So the purpose of our study was to take their original study and see that when no monetary consequences were given for meeting goal steps, we would still get the same results. And you'll be very pleased and surprised potentially by the outcome of our study.
Okay. Thanks, Molly. I'm going to go over the method and how we actually conducted our experiment. As for the participants, there was 5 women, all graduate students, between the ages of 24 to 36. This was probably one of the biggest differences from the original study, as they did older adults with probably around an average of about the age of 55. So this is quite a bit lower difference in age from the original experiment. All of the participants had reported that a desire to increase physical activity prior to beginning the experiment. All also reported that there was no medical conditions that anyone had that would have interfered with their ability to become more physically active or increase their steps. One participant did, however, report that at the beginning of her experiment, she was 32 weeks pregnant. She received approval from her doctor that did state that increasing her total daily step count was acceptable. As for where the experiment took place, each participant was able to participate within their natural daily surroundings. So the experiment did not require anyone to go out of their normal daily routine. Everyone was able to participate in their work, community, home, things like that. With regard to the materials that were needed, each participant required the need to have a fitness tracker that was compatible with the measurement system we used, as well as a charger to charge that tracker. In addition, each participant needed access to the internet. That could be done using either a computer or a handheld device such as a phone or a tablet like an iPad, where they could access the technology's website as well as the data collection methods. As Molly mentioned, our overall goal and purpose was to increase the daily steps. So we went ahead and defined steps in 2 different ways for the purpose of our experiment. The very first one was directly replicated from the original study, in which case they defined a step according to the measurement system that Fitbit uses, where it was defined as an acceleration, which eventually required a mathematical formula to determine the step. So because that was a little bit advanced, not very concise and technological, we went ahead and further defined a step to make it a little bit more objective as physically moving one leg in front of the other from a standing position, beginning when the foot leaves the ground and then ending when the foot returns to the ground or the floor. As I mentioned, the measurement system that we used was the Fitbit technology. Each of the participants already had access to some form of the Fitbit technology, 2 of which utilized the Fitbit Flex, 1 the Fitbit Blaze, another Fitbit Alta, and finally 1 participant had a watch that had the Fitbit technology already available on it. Within this measurement system, it's a multi-dimensional tracker, so it had access to things like calories burned per day or the total distance. However, for the purpose of our experiment, we only utilized the total step count as part of the measurement system. In addition, the experimental design that we used was a changing criterion design. So that was used to determine the goals and also analyze the effectiveness of the intervention. The changing criterion design, for the length of each criterion phase, we did a 5-day block, which is a direct replication. That allowed plenty of time for stable responding. In addition to the total length of the experiment was about 5 weeks, which was able to provide us at least 3 different criterion changes or opportunities to do so, which allowed us to replicate and demonstrate experimental control and improve the effectiveness of the changing criterion design. With regard to how baseline was conducted across 1 5-day block. So each participant was asked to wear their Fitbit on the wrist of their non-dominant hand for at least a 12-hour interval for each of the 5 days. At the end of that 12-hour interval, they were asked to charge the Fitbit so we could ensure that it would be prepared for the following day. Once that was charging, the participant would go ahead and go on to either Fitbit.com, or if they were using a handheld device, the app that was associated with it. And from there, they would retrieve that total step count that was listed and go ahead and put that information into a shared Google spreadsheet between all 5 of the participants. From there, during the baseline procedure, they were informed to only engage in their normal daily activities and make no attempts to try to increase their steps during this particular phase. The intervention procedure was very, very similar to the baseline. So it remained within a 5-day block. So we did this between a Monday through a Friday period and did not conduct the experiment on Saturdays or Sundays. As I mentioned, the instructions were pretty much exactly the same, just with the addition of taking the total step count and then also providing a brief anecdotal report of the types of activities that they engaged in to try to increase those steps. So in addition to reporting an activity log, as we called it, into the spreadsheet, they were informed that upon the intervention start to do things to encourage increasing the steps, which may include walking a dog or parking your car away from your place of work a little further. As for setting each criterion, for the very first criterion that was set, 1,000 steps were added to the average step count that was collected during the baseline phase. In order to increase the criterion, the participant must have met their criterion on 3 out of the 5 days. If the criterion remained, if they did not meet those 3 out of the 5 days, the criterion remained the same. If, for example, there was no data collected for one of those days, that was considered a day in which the criterion was not met. To increase the criterion, an additional 1,000 steps was added. And then we had it determined that if someone vastly exceeded their criterion and went and highly exceeded their goal for that week, that the next criterion would be increased to the 4th highest step count. So that way the goal was being adjusted accordingly. However, no participants during the intervention phase required that particular criterion. In order to ensure that treatment fidelity existed, some of the measures that were taken by the researchers was to make sure that everyone was using the same technology. So we all had access to the Fitbit technology to measure those total daily steps. Each of us wore the device in the same exact fashion, so all on the wrist. The researchers were also available to one another to help clarify any questions, to help prevent errors in the intervention process. In addition to, because the researchers also served as the participants, if there were any errors in identifying and doing the calculations, to adjust the criterions during the next phase, that could be identified and corrected in advance to prevent any errors and increase that fidelity of the intervention. With regard to the inter-observer agreement, no formal IOA was conducted, but given through the consistent use of the same Fitbit technology, IOA was informally calculated through using that method.
Thanks, Melissa, for walking us through that. I am going to talk a little bit about the results of our study and what we saw compared to our example study. So as you guys heard from Molly and Melissa, we had 1 baseline phase and we had 4 total intervention phases that were analyzed. When looking at our results, and I'll show you guys some graphs coming up, we found that 3 out of 5 participants actually increased their overall average of steps when compared to their baseline average. Baseline values for all participants varied from about 1,800 steps to about 8,300 steps per day, just based off of how active people were at work and the type of work that they were doing, their typical daily activities, aside from attempting to increase those steps. Similarly, the results and the criterion vary per participant, changing on a 1,000 step basis, as you guys heard before, if that goal was met. When looking at our personal results, we found that none of the 5 participants achieved 100% of their criterion goals for all 4 intervention phases. 4 out of 5 participants met their goal and increased their steps 1 time during the study. The outlier in our participant was 1 out of 5 participants met their goal, increasing a total of 3 times during the study. So that ranges from an average of 25% of criterion met to about 75% of criterion met. Those percentages are based off of those who are achieving 1, 2, 3, or etc. out of 4 goals that were set. So we're going to take a look at some of our graphs. The first result is from our participant HGO 36, and her total of steps increased from an average baseline of 5,101 steps to an overall average of 5,636.8 steps. As you can see on our graph, the changes in criterion, which is 1 through 4, are known as our experimental phases. Those are marked with a vertical dashed line, and they're labeled as such. And the horizontal dashed line featured on our graph represents the goal that was made by the analyzer for that week. So that would be, in the event that someone made 3 out of 5 of their step goals, they would have an additional 1,000 steps added to their total. So that's what you will see, that horizontal dashed line. Within experimental blocks, you will see 5 connected data points, which will represent our frequency for that week, that Monday through Friday. Additionally, the x-axis is labeled to correlate the progress and the days in progress of our intervention as it progressed from baseline to ending experimental segments for a total of 25 days. And similarly, the y-axis is marked to show the daily frequency, 12-hour day over the course of the experiment. So when we say a 12-hour day, that varied per participant. Some people would get up at 6:30 in the morning. Some people would get up at 8. It just varied. As long as participants were wearing their Fitbit on the non-dominant hand for 12 hours, they were receiving the same results. So let's check out our other graphs. So we have our KE029, and her total steps increased from an average baseline of 6,711.1 to an overall average of 7,027.3. So she increased quite a bit for her overall baseline, which is great. And we decided to use all of our graphs are using the same changing criterion style, and you'll see all of them using the same exact setup. The third result was for MK025. Her total steps were increased from an average baseline of 7,615.4 to an overall average of 9,524.5. This particular participant was one of the participants to increase a total of 3 times during the study. Everyone else increased at least once. Next, we have MR024. Her total steps range, she did not have an overall increase in her steps, but her averages increased from 7,240 to 7,116.5. So we saw a little bit of a decline, but there are some outliers where her Fitbit technology was forgotten one day, so you'll see a drop in averages compared to other days when it was consistently worn. And lastly, we have MP029, and her total steps also did not increase. They ranged from an average baseline of 4,041.2 to 3,327.15 steps. This particular participant was in fact the one who disclosed that she was 32 weeks pregnant beginning our experiment. So we expected to see a little bit, as she progressed into her pregnancy, a little decline in her physical activity, but that was expected. As I said before, everything is labeled similarly, displaying frequency and days in progress, as well as those horizontal dashed lines to display the goal overall criterion. And those are our results.
Thanks, Mary. Okay, so some of the limitations the participants came across. There was definitely no reinforcer, so there wasn't a high enough reinforcer for all the participants. So the participants were not paid if they achieved their goal, nor there was not any set reinforcer that was set, beforehand. Another limitation that they came across, due to very busy schedules or very different schedules of participants were not able to focus on reaching their criterion or focus on reaching their goal. The goal was to wear the Fitbit for a duration of 12 hours each day, and some of the participants may have not been able to achieve the amount of steps or be able to wear that Fitbit for the full 12 hours. And a final limitation that the participants came across was that would be some of the participants' jobs would not allow for excessive walking or taking time out of their day to be able to catch up on those steps.
Thank you, Carrie. So just to kind of summarize what everybody already talked about and to give some conclusions, all the participants did increase step counts during the study. While some of the averages did go down a little bit, everyone did meet their criterion at least once. 3 out of the 5 participants had higher step counts at the end of the study, but only 1 increased by more than 1,000 steps. No participant successfully met their goals every week. and some of the limitations that Carrie talked about. We assume that's what was causing it. A lot of the participants mentioned that our busy schedules made it very difficult to meet that criterion from week to week. Only one participant increased her step count for 3 weeks. All the other participants only met their goals once. So our conclusion is that our replication does not achieve the same results as the original study. Participants did not significantly increase total steps per day without contingent reinforcement. So Carrie's going to go through the last two slides, and you can see our references. And thank you very much for watching our video.
Should I stop recording? I was muted, I'm sorry. Yes or no? Yes?
Yeah.